Hi everyone, my name is Jade Calver. I own and operate Calver and Associates Canadian Immigration Services. Today I'm going to talk to you about spousal open work permits for spouses of people who are either studying or working in Canada. So there are two categories. So you need to be a spouse or a common law partner of someone who is studying full-time at a public college or university on a study permit in Canada. So you have to be married or a common law partner of a student. Or the second eligibility criteria is you need to be a spouse or common law partner of someone who is working full-time in Canada for at least 6 months, and they need to be working in a skilled position. So that's in an NOC code 0A or B, and they need to be working full-time for that employer in Canada in order for us to be able to apply for this spousal open work permit for you. In terms of actually submitting the application, I always recommend that you submit the application online to Immigration Canada. I really don't do many paper applications anymore to visa offices, and I always recommend that you apply online. As far as processing times, so even if you're here visiting in Canada, it will always be processed through your country of citizenship, or if you've lived in a country legally for over 12 months, it'll be processed there. So in terms of processing times, the answer is that it differs on where you're applying from. For example, the London visa office will have different processing times than the New Delhi visa office, for example. A few other important factors in terms of what you need to include when you apply for these spousal open work permits. If you're a spouse or a common law partner of a student, so it's really important that you show that that your spouse is enrolled in their program of study. And so I always include transcripts and usually a letter confirming that they're actively attending and enrolled in courses at the institution, just to show that they are complying with their study permit. For spouses of students, I also always include proof that they have the financial resources to support not only themselves as a student, but also you when you come to Canada. You may not find a job right away, so I always show more than enough resources to support both people, especially for when you first arrive on your work permit before you get a job. For spouses of workers, so it's a little bit different. We have to show, obviously, as I said, your spouse needs to be working in a high skilled position. So that's NOC level 0A or B. And so there are two items that you need to include. So you have to show that your spouse is indeed working in this high skilled position. So you do need to include a letter from the employer, and that letter needs to include a very specific list of duties so that the officer can see that it is high skilled work that your spouse is performing. And you also need to include at least 2 pay slips, so from 2 periods of pay, showing that that person is active, and they should be recent, showing that your spouse is actively employed with that employer. A few other factors that I've found with spousal open work permits that are important to show. I like to include, if it's a new marriage, a lot of the times I do like to show proof of the relationship, especially through certain countries such as India. They do like to see not only a marriage certificate, but proof that it is a legitimate marriage, so it's a little bit more like a sponsorship application. So they like to see pictures, correspondence, shared financials, just to show that you're actually, that it's a legitimate marriage and it's not just for the purpose of immigration. And so that's really important to include. I also, as with any temporary residency application, I like to show ties to the home country. So even though you're coming here and maybe you would like to apply for permanent residency one day, you do have to show that you plan to return home to your home country at the end of the stay. So I like to show assets in the home country, proof of your work that you've been doing in your home country, proof of any education. Again, the more educated and as long as you are still employed, it does make you look mobile, especially if you have any international travel history. That helps as well. There's one last point that I wanted to touch on was for spouses who are the spouse of someone who is going from a study permit. So say for example, we get you a Spousal Open Work Permit for your spouse who's studying here and then is transitioning to a postgraduate work permit. It is important to note that if you're doing that transition, your spouse will need to show that they do have that high skilled work job offer and that they've been working for at least a couple of pay periods for that employer. So you as the spouse, a lot of the time we need to actually switch your status to a visitor so that your spouse can apply for the postgraduate work permit. And then once they start working on that postgraduate work permit, then we can apply to change your status back to a worker while showing that they've been working for that employer and with those payslips. So that's everything for today. For any further questions on spousal open work permits, please contact us. We're online at calverimmigrationservices.com.